Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, and we've got some breaking news, and I want to keep you updated on things as they unfold as we speak. President Trump has just announced on Truth Social that American forces have indeed, in his words, completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. So this marks the first direct U.S. military engagement with Iran's nuclear infrastructure and represents the most significant escalation in Middle East tensions in decades. The strikes targeted Iran's most critical nuclear facilities using B-2 stealth bombers carrying the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs, weapons only America possesses. It was clearly a covert operation. Trump specifically emphasized that a full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordo, the heavily fortified underground facility that Israel supposedly could not penetrate alone. All pilots and aircraft are safe. They're out of harm's way. The operation was a success, with President Trump declaring that there is not another military on the planet that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. So the operation involved multiple B-2 bombers that had been positioned across the Pacific in recent days. Again, all U.S. aircraft have safely exited Iranian airspace. This is obviously American military strength in action, unprecedented military strength, and Trump's tone is obviously very triumphant. Again, you got to hand it to him. I mean, this was strategic ambiguity at its finest. You had no idea what he was going to do. It keeps the enemies off balance. They have no idea how to respond. He gives them 2 weeks. He lures them into a false sense of complacency, and then boom. Now, we'll get more word on the specific effects of this military campaign in the days ahead. Now, we did get word yesterday that multiple B-2 stealth bombers departed Whitman Air Force Base in Missouri, heading west toward the Pacific. These aren't routine training flights. We knew that, these are the only aircraft in the world capable of carrying the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs needed to destroy Iran's underground Fordo nuclear facility. Defense officials were being very careful with their words, but the message was pretty clear. Trump was positioning America's most advanced military assets within striking distance of Iran. The USS Ford, our newest and most powerful aircraft carrier, it also moved toward the region. It's there now. And we've got word behind the scenes that diplomatic efforts collapsed. Trump and Turkish President Erdogan attempted to arrange secret negotiations in Istanbul, but reportedly Iran's Supreme Leader KHAMENEI is currently in hiding for fear of assassination. He couldn't even have been reached to approve the talks. And his representatives were basically saying that they had nothing to say to the United States and that their nuclear program was non-negotiable. So needless to say, it does appear that their nuclear program is either no longer existent or it's been bombed to relative irrelevance. Again, we will see in the hours ahead. Now, I found the military historian Victor Davis Hanson's analysis very helpful here. This was from earlier today, but he outlined 3 distinct scenarios for how American intervention in Iran could unfold and the implications of each. And he began with what he called the pessimistic scenario. In other words, he starts in effect with sort of the bad news. So his logic is this: if we strike Iranian nuclear facilities, that will not be the end. It'll only be the beginning. Iran has spent decades building a global network of proxy forces, and they're going to activate every cell they have to target American diplomats, American soldiers, American civilians worldwide. We're talking about, potential assassination attempts on President Trump himself. And to make this even worse, the military reality is even more sobering. So as Hansen notes, even if we successfully destroy Iran's most prominent nuclear facilities, there's no guarantee they can't be rebuilt quickly. So, of course, we've seen this movie before. We tried regime change through airstrikes with Saddam Hussein in 2003, with Gaddafi during Reagan's presidency, with Milosevic in the Balkans. None of these efforts succeeded through air power alone. The pessimistic assessment concludes that even eliminating Iran's supreme leader would not necessarily collapse the government or guarantee that whatever replaces it would be better. Instead, the pessimists are better, what we call the non-interventionists, like we talked about yesterday in our live stream. They're advocating instead for renewed negotiations, bringing back nuclear monitors, and using the current destruction by Israel to buy 3 to 4 years of breathing space for diplomacy. So obviously that's off the table now. That's history. That's not happening given Trump's announcement. So then let's examine the optimistic scenario, which frankly sounds almost too good to be true. But the optimists do believe we're witnessing the systematic dismantling of Iran's military capability in real time. Israel's already destroyed 50% of Iran's mobile missile launchers, and the number of missiles reaching Israeli territory decreases daily. Here's where it gets interesting. According to this view, Israel's eliminated an entire generation of nuclear physicists. They've wiped out military command structures filled with experienced officers in their 50s, their 60s. Supreme Leader Khamenei is isolated and vulnerable, especially after his forces struck an Israeli hospital, which could justify targeting him directly. The optimistic scenario predicts that Khamenei's elimination would trigger a popular revolt. The Iranian people, freed from decades of oppression by leaders who are now dead or hiding, would rise up and demand change. The new Iranian government would voluntarily dismantle the nuclear program, making American military intervention ultimately unnecessary in terms of troops and tanks. So this scenario assumes that destroying the regime's leadership structure will cause the entire system to collapse like a house of cards. Finally, or thirdly, Hansen's realistic scenario is the most nuanced and frankly the most likely. President Trump, he thought at the time, would wait at least a week to see if Israel could develop creative solutions to destroy Iran's underground nuclear facilities without direct American intervention. In the meantime, Trump has largely addressed the MAGA base's concerns by promising that any American intervention would be absolutely limited, no extensive boots on the ground, no troops, no tanks, no long-term occupation, just a decisive one and done operation. And it appears that this is the course that Trump has chosen. He's making it clear that this bombing was one and done, as far as he's concerned, that Iran needs now to come to peace negotiations and end this thing. And I'm sure he's extending some major carrots to get them to the negotiation table as we speak. That said, regarding great power competition, because we are in a multipolar civilizationalist world, that said, Hansen's analysis is very interesting here. He does not think Russia is going to get involved in this at all. And that's because Russia's just completely consumed by its own war, the Ukraine war. They're just not in any position to get involved. Meanwhile, Russia actually benefits from Middle Eastern chaos because it drives up oil prices, which of course is a big concern for Trump and his commitment to get inflation, the cost of living expenses down. China, they're not going to intervene either, but for opposite reasons. They depend on Middle Eastern oil, and they want regional stability, not conflict. So China's already in a trade war with America, and it's not going to risk any kind, it doesn't want to escalate the tensions. And then finally, Hansen argues that from his vantage point, the war appears to be going actually quite well for Israel. They've largely taken out 50% of Iran's military capability. The regime might fall of its own weight. However, there's only a 25% chance that whatever replaces the current regime would actually be better. Regardless, what we just witnessed was really a masterclass in Trump's strategic ambiguity. He's maintained the credible threat of overwhelming force while signaling that he was allowing for our ally to exhaust diplomatic and creative military operations over the next 2 weeks, which seemed to distract Iran away from an imminent U.S. strike, which we now know just occurred, and was, according to President Trump, very successful in accomplishing its mission. Again, we will have to see. So, stay vigilant, stay in prayer. History is being written right before our very eyes. God bless.